The 10th year we were together, he fell in love with someone else. He took her on the hot air balloon ride I had always wanted. He bought her the Riverview apartment I had always dreamed of living in. On the day of my surgery, she got stranded on the highway because of a storm. He told me to wait, just wait a little longer. He'd be here soon. I asked, right now, are you afraid of losing me or afraid of leaving her all alone? He didn't answer. Chapter 1. In the 10th year of our relationship, Nicholas found someone else. The phone lying on the table kept lighting up. The messages were from her. The tie you're wearing today doesn't match your outfit at all. Next time, let me pick one for you. The tie was a gift from me. The clothes were too. On our wedding anniversary, Nicholas had put together an outfit using everything I had given him. He was already a prominent figure in the city. Wearing everything like that looked a little ridiculous. But he said, anyone who says it looks bad is just jealous that I have such a great wife. Really? Was she jealous too? Another message popped up. By the way, do I look pretty today? Do you like it? Attached was a photo, suggestive but not revealing, young and fair-skinned. At that very moment, Nicholas called out from the bathroom, "Honey, can you bring me a towel?" For a second, I didn't know what to do. It wasn't until a cold tear slid down my cheek that I realized what had just happened. My trembling fingers scrolled upward. I saw him calling her baby, telling her she was the most precious person in his heart. Over the years, Nicholas had become increasingly mature and composed. I had always thought he no longer liked those sweet, clingy pet names, but it turned out he still did. The only difference was that he wasn't saying them to me anymore. Chapter 2. Nicholas came out muttering, "Why are you ignoring me? I'm freezing to death. If I catch a cold, where are you going to find?" His eyes landed on my pale face. The words died in his throat. After a moment of silence, he said, "Valen, it's not what you think. She's just an intern trying to take shortcuts." I knew this day would come sooner or later. Without a word, I stood up and walked into the bedroom. The truth was, there had been signs long ago. I knew everything. A few years earlier, he had gotten drunk, and his secretary had brought him home. He was calling out for his wife, yet she skillfully took off his shoes and loosened his collar. She called me sis, but the hostility in her eyes was impossible to hide. I poured her a glass of water and politely showed her the door. That night, I sat by the window. My mind was a mess. I couldn't sleep. I knew there was nothing between them. At most, they were flirting with the line. As I sat there thinking, Nicholas woke up. He was a very smart man. He sensed that something was wrong. Burying his face in my neck, he whispered, "Valen, trust me. We've been together for so many years. I know what I should do and what I shouldn't." Did I trust him? I wanted to, but suspicion and doubt were like mold growing wildly in a dark sewer. I couldn't control myself. Back then, I was practically losing my mind. I checked his schedule. I searched through his phone. Any disagreement would end with me questioning him. Finally, one day, he got tired. I already fired her. "What more do you want from me?" His eyes were filled with disappointment. I froze, looking at the person in the mirror. I wondered in shock. Was that really me? Was I still the woman who had been knocked down by life countless times, only to stand up again every time? That tangled hair, that tense expression. I covered my face and broke down in tears. Nicholas pulled me into his arms and whispered, "Valen, can you trust me?" After that, he seemed to change. He hired a male secretary. He started telling me his schedule voluntarily and letting me check his phone, even when I planted people in his company to keep an eye on him. He chose to look the other way. Really? Have you ever tried giving half your life to another person? I have. I've known Nicholas for 13 years. Nearly half of my life had his presence in it. We had been together for 10 years. We had supported each other for 10 years. I decided to give him another chance. But now, that chance was gone. We had been married for 5 years. He once told me that when his career finally took off, he would make up for everything with a grand wedding. He would let everyone know that I was his wife. His one and only. I still remember the light in his eyes when he said those words. Just like me, he had once looked forward to that day. But that day would never come. and I regret that deeply. Chapter 3. Nicholas stood outside the door, begging me to let him in. Valen. Let's talk. Valen. Please open the door. Valen. Say something to me. Afraid I might do something reckless. He even called a locksmith. I opened the door with a suitcase in hand as if nothing had happened. Over the years, we'd had plenty of arguments. Every time, he was the one who left. This was the first time I had decided to leave first. Before things get any uglier, let's end this. He said nothing. Instead, he snatched my suitcase and followed me around like a stubborn rogue. The house was huge, but there were only a few things I truly wanted to take with me. When he refused to give back my suitcase, I started stuffing my things into plastic bags. Every item I picked up, he took away. I was exhausted. Nicholas, I said, bring her to meet me. I want to see what kind of woman is worth throwing away all the years we had together. Was I unwilling to let go? Probably. Nicholas froze, pain flashing across his face. He probably couldn't understand why I was so calm this time. Maybe I'd finally run out of disappointment. Maybe I'd known this day was coming all along. Don't do this. Valen, please don't do this to me. Yell at me, hit me, just don't treat me like this. Was I the one torturing him? No, people have to take responsibility for their own choices. With a smile, I said, shouldn't she come see the trophy she won? His eyes turned red. Valen, you're the one I love. I don't even know what's wrong with me. Maybe it's because she reminds me of you. When she's stubborn, she's just like the old you. I murmured. Then am I not myself anymore? He paused, speechless. Chapter 4. In the middle of the night, I walked out carrying plastic bags. Nicholas stepped in front of me, dropping the pitiful act, rubbing his forehead. He said, "What exactly are you trying to do? I've admitted I was wrong. How long are you going to keep this up?" How could he sound so justified? Looking at the man I'd loved for 10 years, I suddenly didn't know what to say. You manage the company's finances. Everyone calls you the boss's wife. What else could you possibly be unhappy about? What else could I be unhappy about? He knew exactly what I wanted, yet in a tone that sounded almost charitable. He said, "What I have with her is just a fling. She'll never threaten your place. No matter what happens, you'll always be my wife." I didn't want to argue anymore. I walked around him and headed toward the elevator. His voice suddenly turned cold. "Valentina, if you walk out that door today, I'll go pick her up right now and move her in." Even those cheap threats were now being used on me. I let out a bitter laugh. My voice was calmer than I ever imagined it could be. "Do whatever you want." He froze. As the elevator doors closed between us, I saw the disappointment all over his face. He still thought I was the one being unreasonable. As soon as I arrived at the hotel, a friend request popped up on my phone. "I'm Virginia." Her. After I accepted, neither of us spoke. The timing was too perfect. Had Nicholas told her that I'd found out? Look at that. I'd barely left, and he'd already gone to her. More than a decade of love had really turned out to be this fragile. Virginia's social media had no viewing restrictions. I scrolled through it casually. She had clearly put effort into every photo. Every single one was beautiful, and every single one included Nicholas. He always told me he was away on business. Too busy. Yet somehow he still found time to take her to Disney to watch fireworks, to take her to Sonia for a hot air balloon ride. Without saying a word, she was showing off their happiness to me. In those photos, Nicholas looked genuinely happy. He wasn't young anymore. Yet around her, he smiled like a boy in his first love, sincere, passionate, and completely devoted. My chest tightened. The pain came in waves. I had once believed, with absolute certainty, that even if the world turned upside down, he would keep loving me. Did he still love me? I couldn't tell. If he loved me, how could he find someone else? If he didn't, why go to such lengths to hide it from me? Maybe he was just attached to the past. Maybe he just didn't want the trouble. Virginia was the first to speak. She asked me to meet her and talk. I agreed. Chapter 5. At the cafe, Virginia went on and on about how they met and fell in love. It was a pretty cliché story. A young girl and a wealthy older man, Stories like that were all the same. With complete sincerity, she said, "Girl, I really love him. Please let us be together." Her tone was so matter-of-fact, as if I were the villain trying to tear apart two lovers. How could I explain to her that compared to everything Nicholas and I had built together, their little love story was hardly worth mentioning? If she had known Nicholas when he was young, she probably wouldn't have liked him at all. I was the one who taught him everything. I was the one who helped shape him into the man he became. Now he was gentle, wealthy, and refined, the kind of man who could easily make a young girl fall for him. Stirring my coffee, I asked, "If you'd met Nicholas at 20, broke, eating expired bread, sleeping in a rundown housing unit, would you still have liked him?" She paused. There was a flicker of hesitation, but she still answered, "I don't care. I love him now." I smiled and shook my head. "When you reach my position one day, there'll be girls just like you lining up after him," she replied without a second's hesitation. "There won't be. Nicholas will always love me." How naive. Wearing an expression of earnest concern, she continued, "Nicholas doesn't love you anymore. You should stop holding on to him. If this keeps going, none of the three of us will be happy." I looked at her. "Did Nicholas tell you to say all this?" Her eyes shifted away. I smiled. When a successful man dumps his wife for someone younger, people talk. Nicholas cares a lot about his reputation. Little girl, I've known him for more than 10 years. I know him better than you do. She fell silent for a moment before speaking again. "You drove here, right? Can you give me a ride? I live at Swan Residence." So that was where Nicholas had hidden her. "I heard from Nicholas that you used to really want to live there." She smiled proudly, as though she'd finally scored a point against me. "That was 6 or 7 years ago. One of our clients lived there. After we drove him home, I happened to glance out the window from his living room. The river view was stunning. At night, the city lights sparkled across the water. On the opposite bank, a giant Ferris wheel turned slowly against the skyline. I was completely mesmerized. The client had been drinking. His words were blunt. "Beautiful view. Huh? You like it?" Embarrassed, I nodded. "It's 100,000 per square meter. How many years would people like you have to work for that? You might not even afford it in this lifetime." Back then, I was still a young girl. His casual mockery brought tears to my eyes almost instantly. After we left, Nicholas held my hand and swore that one day he would let me live there. Later, he became successful. He made money. He built a career. One day, he asked whether I still liked that Riverview apartment. The truth was, I did, but it was too far from the company. I couldn't bear the thought of him waking up 30 minutes earlier every day just to commute back and forth. So I shook my head. What we have now is fine. I'm getting older. I care more about practicality these days. Living closer is more convenient. If I didn't live there, someone else naturally would. All the regrets of my youth. He carefully treasured them in his hands, then offered them to another woman. How ridiculous. Was I unwilling to let go? Probably. I was the one who planted the vine. Day after day, I tended it. I watered it. I fertilized it. Sometimes I worried there wasn't enough sunlight and the grapes wouldn't grow. Sometimes I worried there was too much sunlight and they'd be scorched. For 10 years. Careful, diligent, unwavering. And when the grapes finally ripened, someone else picked them first. What was left for me was nothing but a withered branch. How pathetic. I've weathered plenty of storms over the years. I've learned how to control my emotions, but resentment and heartbreak wrapped around my throat like an invisible hand, squeezing tighter and tighter, until I could barely breathe, suppressing everything I felt. I said as calmly as possible, "You should take a taxi home yourself. We're not going the same way." I practically fled. Chapter 6. In the car, a sudden wave of nausea hit me. I pulled over to the side of the road and threw up violently. Dr. Marco told me I was pregnant. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Congratulations, Mrs. Nicholas and I had tried so hard for this child. The doctor said I shouldn't overwork myself or put myself under too much stress. So I gradually stepped back from the company. I went back to school, learned flower arranging, and filled my days with lighter, easier things. Some people recommended traditional herbal medicine to improve my health, but my stomach had always been sensitive. Those medicines smelled awful. Every time I drank them, I'd spend the entire night awake, nauseated and miserable. Nicholas would stay up with me, gently patting my back and helping me through it. Later, we decided to try IVF. After the procedure, my face was pale from exhaustion. In the end, it failed. I sat by the window, staring blankly outside. Nicholas's eyes turned red. I knew he was hurting just as much as I was. Even so, he gently comforted me. Valen, we don't have to have a child. Having you is enough for me. How could life be so ironic? When I stopped wanting a child, the child finally came. Dr. Marco was practically an old acquaintance of ours. He was genuinely happy for us. You should tell Mr. the good news right away. After everything you've been through, this is finally your reward. I gripped the test report in my hand. I couldn't smile. After thinking about it for a long time, I decided to tell Nicholas about the baby. We agreed to meet at a restaurant. The restaurant had been there for many years. The little shops around it had changed countless times. The streets no longer looked the way they once had. Only this place remained exactly where it had always been. I remembered when we had first arrived in this city. We were poor, so poor that our pockets were emptier than our faces. We would order the cheapest meal on the menu and share it. Back then, Nicholas was truly good to me. He'd practically shove every piece of meat from his bowl into mine. We were deeply in love then. One bite for you, one bite for me. Of course, neither of us ever got full. The restaurant offered unlimited soup refills. That was the main reason we chose to eat there. We were both young then, young people with big appetites. I don't remember which trip it was to refill the soup. The cashier, a young woman, complained impatiently. You've already had several bowls. Nicholas's hand trembled around the bowl. His entire face flushed bright red. Yet he still stepped in front of me. He didn't want those contemptuous looks to hurt me. As he stood there stammering, trying to say something, the owner noticed our embarrassment. Smiling, he said, "Just come eat here from now on. Pay for one meal and eat enough for two." Nicholas was the kind of person who never forgot a kindness. After the company stabilized, he invested some money to help the owner open a restaurant chain. His only condition was that this restaurant remain exactly the same. On the surface, he said it was because he was sentimental, but I knew the real reason. He wanted to remind himself never to forget the hardships and struggles that had brought him this far. And yet, the restaurant hadn't changed, but the people had. Chapter 7. When I arrived, Nicholas had already ordered the food. The flavors were still familiar. We were no longer the people we used to be, splitting a single piece of meat in half just to make it last. Valen, you've lost weight. He placed some food on my plate. Eat more. His voice was so gentle, as though the arguments, the betrayal, and everything that had happened between us had never existed. But this peaceful scene was nothing more than an illusion. Virginia's arrival shattered it completely. Nicholas, didn't you say you don't love her anymore? Why are you meeting her behind my back? Nicholas's expression darkened. He told her to leave. Virginia suddenly exploded. Then let me tell you the truth. I'm pregnant with your child. She's a hen that can't lay eggs. But I'm not. Nicholas's face instantly turned ugly. Without warning, he slapped her across the face. Watch your damn mouth. Apologized to Valen. It had been a long time since I'd heard him swear. Virginia covered her cheek. Tears filled her eyes as she glared at us. She looked stubborn, pitiful. Then she ran away. Outside, traffic flowed endlessly through the streets, ignoring everything around her. She rushed straight across the road. Car horns blared one after another. A driver rolled down his window and shouted, "Are you crazy? Do you have a death wish?" Nicholas's hand tightened on the table. Again and again, his gaze never left her. Not for a single moment. Only after Virginia disappeared into the crowd did he finally look back at me. Valen, she's young. She's impulsive. I'm worried she might do something stupid. I nodded. Go check on her. His departure was hurried. I took a sip of tea. The bitterness made me want to cry. Suddenly, I remembered something from years ago. I had been pregnant once before. Back then, we had been extremely careful. We didn't want children. The baby had come at the wrong time. Our careers were just beginning to take off. I couldn't leave Nicholas to face all the storms outside on his own. But I also knew how soft-hearted he was. If I told him, he would hesitate. He would beg me to keep the baby. So I never told him. I went to the hospital alone. I thought I was young. There would be other children. I thought I was young. My body would recover quickly. But Nicholas eventually noticed something was wrong. Back then, I was all he could see. The slightest change in me never escaped his attention. I thought he'd be angry. I thought he'd ask why I hadn't discussed it with him. But he didn't. He only cried. Come to think of it, that was the first time I had ever seen him cry. The first time. He was soft-hearted. But he was also proud. Yet that day, he just sat there in a daze, looking completely lost. I didn't know what to do. I kept asking him to say something, and all he said was, "Valen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm useless. I'm so useless." I shook my head. No, it's just that this child wasn't meant to be ours. That day, he knelt in front of me. He promised that one day he would give me a good life. He promised that one day I would never have to suffer like this again. Back then, his eyes shone so brightly. When he looked at me, all he saw was me, and suddenly, I understood something. The love he once had for me, it was real, and the fact that he no longer loves me now, that is real too. Chapter 8. I went to the hospital alone. It was raining heavily that day. Outside the operating room, I received a message from Virginia. "Girl, want to make a bet? Let's see whether he chooses the one in my belly or the one in yours." She sent me a photo. She was standing alone on the highway, drenched in the rain. A moment later, another image arrived. A screenshot of a conversation. She had sent the exact same message to Nicholas. Not long after, a nurse called my name. "Valentina? Where's your family? Didn't anyone come with you?" I had no family. I shook my head. "I'm here alone." My phone rang. Nicholas's voice came from the other end. "Valen, don't do anything impulsive. Wait for me, okay?" The sound of car horns echoed in the background. His urgency was obvious. "Valen, think about everything we've been through. Think about everything we've done for this baby. Wait for me. We'll talk about it together." "Valen, don't you want to be a mother?" I asked him. "Right now. Are you afraid of losing me? Or are you afraid she's all alone?" He didn't answer. Then Virginia's cheerful voice came through the phone. "Valentina, we're coming to see why." She stopped abruptly. Nicholas had hung up. So, he had already found her. Honestly, her little scheme wasn't even clever. Nicholas was smart. There was no way he didn't see through it. He was simply afraid. Afraid she'd be hurt. Afraid that even the slightest possibility might cause him to lose her. The cold medication flowed into my veins. I closed my eyes, and thought about how, once upon a time, he had rushed toward me with the very same determination. Countless memories flooded my mind. Too many to count. We had been together for far too long. So long that I had once believed he was simply meant to be a part of my life. I had accepted that as naturally as breathing. I met him when I was 17. 17. Such a beautiful age. My 17, however, was buried in mud and hardship. And yet, that was when I met Nicholas. I had started school late. At 17, I was still in my final year of middle school. Nicholas had come from the city to our small town. He was an outsider there. The town was tiny. News traveled fast. People said Nicholas was a bastard. They said his mother was another man's mistress and that was the only reason she could afford to raise him. Whenever Nicholas heard those words, he'd fight, viciously, every single time. He'd end up bruised and battered. The calm, sophisticated man he was today had once been a lonely and rebellious boy. Sometimes I marveled at what time could do to a person. I never knew what made him notice me. Maybe it was the bruises on my arms. Maybe it was the similarities in our circumstances. Whatever the reason, we became close friends. Later, my father and stepmother started planning to marry me off. Nicholas was the one who saved me. He was the one who told me the world outside was full of possibilities. He was the one who stood in front of me and said that I still had him. He was the one who took my hand and taught me how to run without fear. He was the one who helped me escape that place. The one who saved me from a future where I would be treated like something to be chosen and traded. In all my darkest memories, he was one of the few sources of light. But now, that light had faded, and those memories had become the sharpest blade of all. Every scene, every promise, every moment, they stabbed into me again and again. Time is cruel. It turned both of us into people we no longer recognize. Chapter 9. When I woke up from the anesthesia, I sat blankly on the edge of the bed. A tear slid down my cheek. Cold. Nicholas rushed into the room. The moment he arrived, he demanded angrily, "What have you done, Valentina? That was our child, the child we worked so hard for." I looked up. The first thing I noticed was that he'd buttoned his shirt wrong. I didn't want to think too deeply about what that meant. "Valentina, answer me. Have you lost your mind?" I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and handed them to him. He snatched them away and tore them to pieces. The fragments fluttered through the air like falling snow. In recent years, it had become rare to see him lose control like this. I said calmly, "Stop pretending, Nicholas. Everything happening now is your own doing. The reason we've ended up here is you." His brows tightened. His fists clenched at his sides, so hard that even his arms were trembling. The air suddenly felt heavy, stagnant, as though I had been wrapped inside layers of airtight plastic. I couldn't breathe. Doubling over, I started shaking from discomfort. In the end, Nicholas gave in, patiently. He tried to explain. "Valen, she never went to the highway. She lied to you." He said that when Dr. Marco called. He had been in the shower. Virginia was the one who answered the phone. He said the photo had been edited. The chat screenshots had been fabricated by her as well. At that moment, everything finally made sense. No wonder his buttons were fastened wrong. What they had been doing before he came here didn't need explaining. As soon as I found out, I came straight here. "Valen, I genuinely wanted our baby." He took my hand. "Valen, everything we have will belong to our child. We would have given them the best love in the world. I would have been a good father, a good husband." I asked quietly, "What about the baby she's carrying?" His answer came immediately. "I'll make her get rid of it. No one can threaten our child's place." His tone was absolute. To convince me to change my mind, he was willing to say anything, even something that ruthless. A laugh escaped me, then another, and another. Before long, tears were streaming down my face. My lower abdomen throbbed with pain. It felt as though a knife was twisting inside me. I suddenly realized I truly didn't know this man anymore. The Nicholas in my memories had been sincere, kind-hearted. He was never like this. Never. I kept laughing. Nicholas's expression darkened with embarrassment and anger. Finally, he grabbed my shoulders. Hard. "Stop laughing. Do you have to act this crazy?" I wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. "If you won't sign the papers, then I'll see you in court." After that, I began preparing for the divorce proceedings. Winning the case wasn't particularly difficult. I had plenty of evidence. Everything Virginia had said, everything Nicholas had done. I'd documented it all, but it wasn't simple either. Nicholas had connections everywhere. The first court hearing came. He didn't show up. Instead, he called me. "Valen, does it really have to come to this?" "Yes," I replied. "Let's treat it as a grand farewell to everything we once had." He sighed. His voice sounded exhausted. "Valen, let's meet one more time." Chapter 10. Nicholas took me back to our hometown. The place had changed completely. The school had been renovated. It was the season of blooming grass and singing birds. And children were playing soccer on the field. A soccer ball suddenly flew toward us. Without a second of hesitation, Nicholas instinctively stepped in front of me to block it. Just like he used to, when classmates spat on me, when my father beat me with a broom. He had always stood in front of me. "Did it hit you?" he asked. I shook my head. A wave of melancholy washed over me. We had been able to endure hardship together, but we couldn't share success together. We continued walking. Several times, he tried to take my hand. I didn't let him. We followed the same route we had once taken when we ran away together. On a hillside, His foot suddenly slipped. I reached out to grab him but missed. All I could do was watch him tumble down the slope. Nicholas! A moment later, he jumped out of the bushes holding a bouquet of flowers. I was still shaken. The tear in my eyes had almost fallen. Then he dropped to one knee. Valen, I owe you a wedding. Let's start over. Inside the box was an enormous diamond ring. I promised you. I said I'd give you the grand wedding you deserved. I never forgot. No, he had forgotten. We had already been married for 5 years. The company had become successful years ago. Yet only now did he remember. Nicholas brushed aside the hair on his forehead. Valen, remember this scar? We promised we'd never leave each other. Never. I shook my head. There is no forever anymore. Nicholas, is it really that hard to keep loving the same person? As if trying to prove something, he answered urgently. No, Valen, it isn't. It really isn't. The person I've always loved is you. He was still lying. Lying to me. Lying to himself. He was practically kneeling before me. He said he was wrong. That he truly knew he was wrong. That he still loved me. Valen, can you give me one more chance? Let's start over. Looking at his face, I found myself wondering, when was the last time I saw him cry? The first memory that came to mind was when he landed his first major contract. He held me tightly and said, Valen, I told you, I'd give you a good life. After years of hardship, success had finally come. His eyes had turned red from emotion. Further back than that, the day I agreed to marry him, he cried so hard, promising he'd spend his whole life treating me well. His whole life. Yet only a few years had passed before he stopped wanting to. And then there was that other time. That time, the company had only just begun to grow. I did everything. I was the secretary, the accountant, the purchasing manager, the cleaner, everything. Until one day, I collapsed from exhaustion. When I woke up, the doctor told me it might be stomach cancer. The words hit me like a boulder. Suddenly, all the vomiting and stomach pain I'd been experiencing finally had an explanation. Nothing felt real. Nicholas stood frozen, muttering to himself, Impossible. How is that possible? You're still so young. He looked like a man who had lost his soul. The only words he could repeat were, Impossible. He had always been calm and composed. But that day, he completely lost control. He grabbed my hand and dragged me toward the door. We're not staying here. They must have misdiagnosed you. We'll go to a better hospital. We'll find the best doctors. But I understood far better than he did what lay ahead. My mother had died of stomach cancer. In the early and middle stages, it was treatable. But we had no money back then. So we delayed. And delayed. Until she no longer looked human. She once said, Don't let your father come see me. I don't want him to remember me like this. What she never knew was that the man she loved so deeply had already found someone else. I was only 5 years old, yet I'd already seen how cold people could be. I was terrified. Terrified that Nicholas and I would eventually become like that. Get out! Just leave me alone for a while, okay? Get out! After we arrived at the larger hospital, I hit him, kicked him, told him to leave. He didn't say a word. He only held me tighter. His tears soaked into my collar, burning hot. I couldn't let myself soften. I couldn't. The scar on his forehead came from that day. I'd thrown my keys at him, even with blood running down his face. He refused to leave. In the end, there was nothing I could do. He held me and said, No matter what the result is, we'll face it together, okay? I have money, Valen. I have money. Do you know what my first thought was? I didn't want to drag him down. He was young, talented. His future was bright. This was the opportunity he had waited for his entire life. That money meant everything to him. I wouldn't spend a single cent of it. Chapter 11. After that, I stopped speaking to him. I only wanted him gone. The truth was, I was terrified. I couldn't sleep, and I knew he couldn't sleep either. He curled up in a corner of the room. The hospital ward was overcrowded, and one of the nurses took pity on him. She brought him a blanket and let him sleep on the floor. A man over 6 feet tall, curled up. He looked so small, so pitiful. Had he eaten? What was he thinking about? Neither of us spoke. Just before dawn, I felt him come stand beside my bed. The silence stretched on for a long time. I knew he was looking at me. He secretly took my hand. His fingers traced my brows and the outline of my face. So gently, as if he were afraid of disturbing my sleep. I didn't open my eyes, because if I did, my heart would soften. The hardest part was the afternoon we waited for the results. I read. I watched movies. I walked around, but nothing could distract me. Every movement made me dizzy, made me nauseous. Eventually, I threw up. Nicholas panicked immediately. He kept pounding on the bathroom door, asking what was wrong. Later, he held me in his arms and repeated over and over, "Don't be afraid, Valen. I'm here. Don't be afraid," he said. What does success even mean if I don't have you? Still, I told him to leave. Valen, don't push me away. I'm more afraid than you are. If I leave now, years from now I'll still think about it. I'll still think I'm a complete bastard. He tried to smile, but couldn't. Without you, I might not even live long enough to regret it years later. His eyes were so red. At that moment, I hated fate. I hated how unfair it was. Why us? Why me? Why him? We had already suffered so much. We had slept on sidewalks, under overpasses, in crumbling houses. His arms had been the warmest place in the world. Back when things were at their worst, he'd wait outside bakeries just to collect expired bread they were throwing away. People mocked him. What a loser. Can't even earn enough money to buy bread. Back when things were at their worst, I got appendicitis. He worked at karaoke bars to make quick money. Drunk customers would slap his face with cash. So what if I hit you? You should be grateful I'm even giving you money. He had been young then, hot-blooded, his fists clenched tightly. Yet he didn't fight back. Not once. He needed that money. He needed me to get better. And finally, we no longer had to sleep on the streets. We no longer had to eat expired bread. People rarely insulted him anymore. No one could lay a hand on him. Our lives were finally about to change. We were so close. Just a little more. But fate has always loved cruel jokes. It lets you glimpse hope from a distance. And just when dawn is about to arrive, it tells you everything was an illusion. Then the test results came back. The doctor said it was a misdiagnosis. There was nothing wrong. Nicholas burst into tears. He held me tightly, laughing while he cried, crying while he laughed. A grown man over 6 feet tall. Yet that day, he cried like a child. And suddenly, I realized something. I loved this world. I truly did. And I truly loved him. He had loved me too, with all his heart. So who changed him? I don't know. I'd like to know, too. Chapter 12. I pulled my hand away from his. Then I looked up at the sky. The sunset was beautiful. Nicholas, do you remember what you once told me? You said that instead of wasting your strength crying, you should use it to keep running. Let's both move forward. He remained kneeling there in silence, like a deflated balloon. All the hope that had filled his eyes moments earlier vanished. His eyes were red. Valentina, you're so heartless. On the drive back, neither of us spoke. An old love song played on the radio. The singer's voice drifted through the car. Who was it that whispered in my ear, saying their love would never change? Sitting in the back seat, I gradually fell asleep. When the car stopped, I woke up. Nicholas was standing by the roadside smoking. His shoulders shook violently, and then he broke down completely. Later, I heard that Nicholas had gotten drunk and accidentally pushed Virginia. She lost the baby. A doctor I knew told me that getting pregnant again in the future would probably be very difficult for her. Only one phrase came to mind. What goes around comes around. The divorce proceedings between Nicholas and me eventually came to an end, thanks to my efforts. Most of the assets were awarded to me, including the Riverview apartment. When I arrived with my lawyer to reclaim the property, Virginia was lying in bed resting. The housekeeper answered the door. The moment Virginia saw me, she smirked. "Oh, look who's here, Valentina," covering her mouth. She laughed. The massive diamond ring on her finger sparkled brilliantly. "You have to come to our wedding." My lawyer stepped forward and presented the property deed. Miss Virginia, you are required to vacate this property today. Otherwise, you may be considered unlawfully occupying a private residence, and we reserve the right to contact the authorities. Miss Virginia, my client does not wish to make this any uglier than necessary. You should leave voluntarily. Virginia sneered. It's just a lousy apartment. I'm already tired of living here. A second-hand property that people are fighting over. How ridiculous. From the sofa, I replied lightly. And yet you're the one who rushed to claim someone else's leftovers. Her expression instantly froze. A moment later, she forced a smile and walked toward the entrance. As if claiming ownership, she wrapped her arm around Nicholas's. Nicholas. She's trying to kick me out. Nicholas looked at me. His eyes were filled with complicated emotions. His lips moved slightly, as though he had countless things he wanted to say. But in the end, he only managed one sentence. Valen, it's been a long time. I nodded politely. That was enough of a greeting. Then his gaze landed on Virginia's finger. His expression changed immediately. Who told you that you could wear that ring? Virginia froze. Tears quickly filled her eyes. The illusion of happiness she'd worked so hard to create shattered in an instant. Almost roughly, Nicholas ripped the ring from her finger. Valen, this ring is ruined. I'll buy you a bigger one. I shook my head. I don't need it. Just move out. The buyer is already waiting for the property. He froze. You're selling it? Yes. It's dirty. I don't like it anymore. Virginia pointed at me, her voice trembling with anger. You're being so cruel. One day you'll get what's coming to you. Nicholas suddenly slapped her. Virginia, shut up. Haven't you caused enough trouble already? If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't have lost our child. Virginia covered her face. And what about my child? You think you're innocent? You helped kill my baby too. She burst into tears. I had no interest in watching the drama continue. Turning to my lawyer, I said, I'll leave the rest to you. Then I turned and walked away. Nicholas tried to follow me, but Virginia grabbed him. She doesn't want you anymore. And you're still chasing after her? Have you no dignity at all? Chapter 13. Later, a large company offered me a position. Without hesitation, I left Nicholas's company. Honestly, I was already satisfied. He had contributed more to the company than I ever had. This was for the best. I'd have more opportunities of my own, and we'd have fewer chances to see each other. One day, the receptionist told me, Boss, a Miss Virginia is here to see you. After a moment's thought, I went downstairs. In the cafe, Virginia was completely hysterical. Why? I gave him everything. Why did he fall in love with someone else? He told me he loved me. He said he'd marry me. I had told her from the very beginning. Their relationship wasn't special. It wasn't irreplaceable. Anyone could have taken her place. Suddenly, she stopped crying. She looked up and grabbed my hand. Valentina, take him back. He's still in love with you. That day, when I told him you were pregnant, he grabbed my throat and demanded to know why I hadn't told him sooner. I always thought men only thought with their lower bodies. But that day, he forced himself to stop. He got dressed and went straight to find you. What exactly was I supposed to feel after hearing that? Touched? No. I felt sick. Pulling out an alcohol wipe, I calmly cleaned my hand. Let's leave it here. Don't come looking for me again. If you do, I'll have security escort you out. The city wasn't particularly large. I still ran into Nicholas from time to time. At one business banquet, our paths crossed again. A young and beautiful woman stood beside him. There was something strangely familiar about her. Phineas immediately saw it. She looks a bit like you. Oh, wait. She's even more like you when she smiles. Phineas was the chairman's son. For the time being, he worked under me. He'd been following me around on projects lately. Funny, easygoing, the kind of person who made people laugh without trying. Nicholas noticed me. He immediately shook off his companion's hand and walked over. She's just my date. Some occasions require a woman on your arm. That had nothing to do with me. He didn't owe me an explanation. Valen, if there's ever a day you want to come back, you're always welcome. I smiled, but said nothing. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, he was 17 again, standing in front of me, young, proud, unbroken. He smiled and said, "Hi, I'm Nicholas. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you." Later, I woke up. The tears had already dried. Outside the window, dawn was breaking, and I would keep moving forward, with flowers blooming along the road ahead, with brighter days waiting at every step. And in all the miles of springtime that followed, there would be no Nicholas.